Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
Hello there.
Hi.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good night.
Hello, wherever you are.
Yeah, it's summer. You're out of school.
Oh, finally. It was a long time coming.
True.
Needed it.
Couple of housekeeping things. Please, if you have not yet seen our lovely email newsletter sign up on our website, 16to1.com, all spelled out. It is there. Some of you are using it. It's amazing. Go sign up. Our email newsletter is not coming out just yet, but it will be here soon. Go ahead and get your name on the list. We're going to have Yay! We're going to have resources for educators, announcements about just staying up to date on big professional development opportunities, things like that. Eventually, we're going to hope to have some job listings. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and sign up. That's at the very bottom of our website above the contact. You can sign up for the email newsletter. And thank you to those of you who already have. Another note, next episode is going to be volume 2 of our year in review series. We did one of these last year at the same-ish time. We started it last year and not at the beginning of the pod, so this is only volume 2, even though we've been around for more years than that. I don't know why it's illogical, but don't go looking for any other volumes. But in the year in review episode, we share some of our personal favorite things that we've learned over the course of the year. It's just kind of a nice reflection point, a little bit of a break for us to do something different and fun. It's going to be an important episode, though, because we're going to share some news and announcements and a little bit of goings-on about the pod, so you won't want to miss it. So we're still planning that episode, but we're looking forward to it. Was there any news or housekeeping that you needed to do?
I do have something I want to say, but I don't know if this is the appropriate place for it or not.
Go ahead and say it, and if not, we can cut it.
So Chelsea does the editing of the pod, so she hears the episodes again after they've been recorded, and I don't, because she does the editing when I'm not here normally, or if I am here, she has headphones on, so I can't really hear it, except for when she sends me clips of things that will never see the light of day again. I was listening back through a few older episodes, and I realized that I have the same, exhausted response in the beginning of most of our episodes for, a long period of time. And I want to blame it on my seasonal affective disorder, but the other thing is...
Well, it is kind of funny.
It is, but I was listening back and I was like, man, I'm a drag during the school year. But also, I don't think we've ever talked about it on the pod, but I feel like there was a shift in the pod, last summer and kind of through this past year of our general disposition. And if you know us personally, you know this has been going on. But last summer, literally the first day of school, the dog got a cancer diagnosis. And so that has been kind of haunting us for the past year, I guess I'd say, because we have this very lively dog still here. But we've been dealing with this for a year because we know the odds aren't great. And I feel like ever since that point, it was very obvious that I was like, I hate it. And so if you know us personally, you know that that's what our last year has been like. But I feel like for people who don't know us personally, they're probably like, why were they so mad all summer? Or why is Katie especially grumpy all school year? And so I just wanted to take the blame and say I could always use more Lexapro. But also, if you don't know us personally, you didn't know that has been going on.
Yeah.
And I think that has probably weighed on us a lot more than we've ever talked about on the pod. And it hasn't come up because how would it? But I just kind of wanted to put a note in there that I'm really not as miserable as I sound on this podcast sometimes, but sometimes I am.
I just did some editing at the beginning of some old episodes, and occasionally I will ask you how you are, and you just say yeah.
It's the biggest mistake.
Yeah.
The other thing that we've changed in the past year is when we record.
Yes.
And we used to record after I got home from school, which was, if you're a teacher, you know this, the last thing I want to do when I get home from school is talk.
Yeah.
The worst thing someone could make me do is forcibly talk for 2 hours.
Although I will say, here's the alternative, though, is that the reason we didn't want to record on the weekends, which is what we're now doing, is that I didn't want to cut into your weekend relaxation time as a teacher either.
It was actually much more relaxing
Yes.
record on the weekends.
Yes.
And so we've kind of just been going through that growth and shift a little bit in this past year. And I feel like some of those changes have been good. But if you didn't know us personally, you didn't know that that was also kind of like looming over us.
Yeah. I mean, we're probably going to be doing a couple of different experiments, and we'll talk more about this in the year in review episode. But we're going to just be trying some experiments because we've been looking back at the pod and been just like listening to old things and figuring out where we're going, and doing that means we're probably going to change and experiment with some things. And thank you for sticking around through that, but you may notice some changes. So that's the
and just thing. I don't get to hear them unless I intentionally like listen to us on our drive, which always feels weird.
It does feel really weird to listen to yourself
to a conversation you've already had again.
Yes,
but I feel like it's really good for me to go back and listen to it. So I try to do it. But it is a little weird to like be driving to work and just be listening to our conversation. So, and
you can't even argue with me when you do that.
I'm not there. But I want to.
I've had a couple of our friends who listen tell us that they want to like stop it and argue with things that we've said.
Yeah,
like, which would be not the bad kind of argue, just like friendly, interesting. This because this stuff is interesting to us. Either argue or discuss what's going on, and they feel like it's weird because they know our voices. As normal people instead of podcast hosts. But
so anyways, I just wanted to add that note because I was listening to some of the older ones and I was like, man, why do people keep listening to me when all I am is this big bummer? And so I felt like I wanted to give it some context other than just being a teacher, and that's a bummer some days, but that's also been kind of looming in our personal lives as well. Anyways, that was just my little note about my general disposition. What's our headline roundup this episode?
Okay, so what is the first story?
Susana Cordova, the former superintendent of Denver Public Schools, will be Colorado's next education commissioner. Colorado State Board of Education recently named her as a sole finalist for the position, and her appointment is expected to be formalized in a mid-June board meeting.
Coming up soon. Okay.
The now on the East Coast.
Yes. This is kind of related to my what I learned this week, so we'll talk more about it then. But the headline here is that New York City schools is rolling out huge changes to the way they do reading instruction over the next, kind of staggered over the next few years.
That is good.
Yes, it is a good thing. And like I said, I'll talk more about why later. There's a New York Times article that we'll share too in our sources. But in this article, you learned that about half of city children in grades 3 through 8 are not proficient in reading. Mm-hmm. Half. So something isn't working, but that's a big deal. Keep your eye on what curricula the schools pick, their motivations for why they're picking them, and who is involved in that story, because it is deep. Mm-hmm. Okay, third headline. What is
and
this
now
one?
From the South.
Yeah.
The Georgia Historical Society announced recently that the 22-23 Georgia History Festival, which culminated on April 22nd with the Trustees Gala, had surpassed all previous institutional fundraising milestones by raising a record $1.9 million to further their institution's educational research mission. And those funds help support year-round educational programming and research services for students, teachers, researchers, and general audiences from across Georgia and beyond.
Georgia, huh? Are you thinking of going to Georgia? Why Georgia?
No, but they do. Well, I was reading about it mostly because of the support that offers for teachers, and because they offer professional development and things like that.
Oh, cool.
And I love any time a history festival has money, because one thing history doesn't have is money usually. So
it is nice.
I thought that was cool. $1.9 million is a ton of money for those students and all those people involved. So good for them.
Cool.
And please use that money for good. This episode,
yes,
we're talking about learning to fly, and it's not about the Foo Fighters.
Yes, aviation.
Our inspiration comes from a few places.
Yeah,
we need more pilots. That's like an urgent need in the U.S.
Yes, there's a pilot shortage in this country, much like there's a teacher shortage.
I am a stress ball when I fly, but I think it's so cool. I'm like so endlessly fascinated by it, but I trust it 0%. But I also trust it 100%. And those that know me know
the physics of aviation. You seem a little hostile toward them occasionally.
Well, you read it as hostile, but I'm just stupid. And so that's the difference. The other reason that this is an interest of mine is that I recently had a student complete his private pilot's license because he's about to go to college and pursue an aviation degree. And we have a friend who was working at one time as a flight attendant. And I like really thought that physics worked in such a way that like someday the engines would just not go and we would just be like plop to the ground. And I don't know why I thought that, because I've flown a million paper airplanes in my life and they don't have an engine and they're fine.
True.
It's the fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown. Okay.
What's your interest in this?
My dad.
Oh my gosh, I'm talking to a space camp
Yes. Yeah.
nerd.
It's true. Aviation and space flight. So I grew up in John Glenn's hometown. So that's one big deal.
And if you
right?
don't know who John Glenn is,
American astronaut.
orbited the Earth,
Yes.
famous astronaut who returned in his 70s, U.S. senator, did it all.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, space flight, aviation, piloting, flying, kind of a big deal in my hometown. My dad is also a pilot. He has had his private pilot's license for, I think, as long as I've been alive. I don't know. Like, he's been flying
Let's hope he's had it as long
far as
as
I can remember. We're actually I'm gonna get a few comments from him a little bit later in the show that you'll hear. But anyway, so I've been around flying for a really long time, and I've occasionally co-piloted for my dad, which really just means I sit next to him and listen to stuff happen on the radio. And that's the part of flying that stresses me out, actually, is witnessing how many things you have to manage at once when you're a pilot, and things you have to keep an eye on.
This
and who
is
you
like
have to
one of
talk
those
to.
how the sausage gets made
Yeah.
that I don't want to know about.
Yeah.
It's like better for me as a consumer.
Anyway, I've been interested in flying for a long time, and I think hearing about your student getting his license was really kind of what made me want to revisit this. So let's talk a little bit about just what you have to do to become a pilot.
The research for this kind of just felt like word vomit because there's so many different ways to go about becoming a pilot and becoming a commercial pilot, especially. So I first went to the FFAs, the Future Farmers of America,
Future Farmers of
who
America.
told me how to get a pilot's license. Okay, so I first
We didn't research this one very well. Can you tell?
I did.
No, I'm just teasing.
I've read so much about pilot's license. I just naturally won't say.
And farmers?
The FAA's rules.
Uh-huh.
Which is the what?
The Federal Aviation Administration.
Okay. To get a pilot's license, a certificate, it differs depending on what you're going to fly. So your options are this: airplanes, gyroplanes, helicopters, gliders, balloons, or airships, or ultralight vehicles. And if you want to fly an ultralight vehicle, you don't actually need a pilot's license. That's something different.
Okay, if you don't know what an ultralight vehicle is, we'll link to one because one of our friends actually put this in our Discord chat.
I'm clicking. I'm sorry. I have to know what this is. I haven't seen it.
It looks like an insane...
Oh my gosh. This is like what they used in Fly Away Home. Did you ever see that movie?
No.
With the geese? The little girl raises this whole, what is it, a flock? A gander of geese? I don't know.
Okay.
And they try to teach them how to fly because they don't have a mother.
So they fly in ultralight vehicles?
Well, I guess, this is from like the 90s. Unless this is one of those fever dreams like Shazam or Kazam or whatever that movie was. But anyways, this is like what they flew to get the geese to fly because they would follow her everywhere.
Okay.
This is cool. I don't need a license to drive that. I should.
They only go so high off the ground, and they only, tend to last so long on a charge and stuff. So.
It kind of looks like just 4 drones holding you up in the air.
Yeah. So ultralight vehicles look really silly, and they tend to be very expensive. This is like
they do look really silly.
If you're a kid and you really save up and splurge and buy yourself like a fancy RC car toy. They're kind of fancy,
Oh my gosh, that's so small.
This is the I'm a billionaire level of that. You like buy yourself a fancy ultralight vehicle so you can just like fly across your estate.
It looks like across your estate. It looks like someone's go-kart had its wheels removed.
Yeah, and it flies.
But
not so high not so high that you're in regulated airspace. That one is like $50,000.
$98,000.
Oh, okay. That must be the extended range.
Today, $8,000 down payment.
One of our friends shared this in our Discord just to be like, look at this silly contraption.
Okay.
I can't believe having this much disposable income. That's the kind of thing
that's what you would do with it.
It looks silly. But anyway, that's what an ultralight vehicle is. We'll put the link to it because I wouldn't necessarily have known what that was either. I kind of want to see what a gyroplane looks like.
One moment. I'm Googling.
Oh, and what is the difference between a gyroplane and a helicopter, do you suppose?
It looks like a helicopter, but scarier.
Oh.
Oh, it's so tiny. Oh, that's terrifying. That looks like
Another thing that you wouldn't get in?
this is one of those things that would appear on list of contraptions that killed the person who invented it.
Yes. To learn all about that Wikipedia post, go to our last episode.
So while similar to a helicopter rotor in appearance, the autogyro's unpowered rotor disc must have air flowing upward across it to make it rotate.
So you have to be free falling.
And forward thrust is provided independently by an engine-driven propeller.
Do you just get dropped out of a bigger plane? Like, how do you... I'm trying to imagine in what scenario you would have upward thrust under the rotor if you don't have a motor and the scenario is you're falling.
When you put it like that, I now have more questions than I did.
Okay, we should probably move on.
It really did
We're gonna learn about gyroplanes before.
These things were used in World War II. The Royal Air Force.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. And so did Germany. Had a rotor kite. These things are kind of intense, actually.
I think it will give me anxiety to look at a photo.
It looks like it looks like a kid was trying to build a helicopter from memory. That's what they look like.
Cool.
Because they have the one on top that spins and they have the one on the butt also that spins.
Okay.
I'm going to click off of this Wikipedia page because I'll never recover from this information.
Okay.
So for that, you need a license. Let's say I want to fly a blimp.
Okay.
What's it?
Ooh. Airship? It's an airship.
Airship. Okay.
That would be a dirigible, balloon, blimp, that kind of thing. I think those are airships.
Okay.
At least according to my steampunk dystopian imagination. Those are airships.
You're just like, what happened in Mad Max? And you're just telling me. Okay.
Yes.
So let's say you want to fly a normal thing.
To wage war from the sky? Let's
say
with my steampunk army?
Let's say Goodyear already has all of their blimps filled with people to fly them.
Okay.
Let's start with a private pilot's license.
Yes,
because that's
please.
basically the first thing you have to do.
Yeah, regardless of the path you pick.
In the
you
long
need this
string
first.
of things you may someday fly, you have to start here.
Are you good?
I just... For some reason, when we started talking about driving a blimp, all I could see was the Wienermobile. I don't know why. I don't know why in my head the Goodyear blimp and the Wienermobile like are together. But
wow.
they are. Also, did I think
one
that
if by land, two if by sea, three if by blimp?
Did I think that the Wienermobile could fly?
I don't know. I mean, when you see that thing, you think like that looks like a blow up balloon.
Have you seen that thing
It looks like a balloon.
Have you seen it drive? Have you encountered one in the wild?
It's not exceedingly aerodynamic.
Exceedingly I have seen it once on the road. I'm crying. And honestly, I was probably going over 100 miles an hour to catch up to it because I had to know what was ahead of me. Because I could not figure out what I was looking at. And then I flew up on it, and then I had to slam on my brakes because of those buns. And then it was the Wienermobile. Anyways, whew, okay. You don't need a pilot's license to drive the Wienermobile.
Okay, good.
I had a friend actually at college whose brother got one of those one-year deals.
Yeah.
And got to drive around the Wienermobile for a year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He would like take
It's
it
like
to
a
weddings
year
and
contract.
stuff, and you live in it. Okay, none of that is usable, but dear God.
Oh, we're keeping all of that. Don't worry. We are keeping everything about the Wienermobile.
Okay, we have to move on.
Yeah.
I have to go. But it's so funny. I don't know what I was seeing in my head.
Regardless of what you want to fly.
Yep.
Or what stadium food you want to drive.
So, regardless of what you want to fly, you have to start with a private pilot's license.
Yes.
Then from there, you can decide commercial, whatever. Okay.
Step 1, private pilot's license.
To get your private pilot's license, the first thing you have to do is work with a certified flight instructor. And basically what you do is look for, in your area, flight instructors that are capable of helping you obtain your pilot's license, your private
Okay,
pilot's
so they have like
license.
accreditation and blah, blah, blah. Okay.
And so usually it's like, there's like a ton in our area. Actually, when I was Googling, I was surprised by how many there were. So basically, in order to do that, you need a firm grasp of English and to hold the proper medical certification to attend both ground and flight school. And
I think
then-
you have to like pass a physical or something. That's probably what
Yeah.
that means. I did want to look up approximately how long it would take to get your private license. The hourly requirements for the issuance of pilot certificates and ratings here from the FAA website. Person applying for a private pilot certificate in airplanes, helicopters, and gyroplanes, your favorite, must log at least 40 hours of flight time, of which at least 20 hours are flight training from an authorized instructor and 10 hours of solo flight training, 3 hours of cross-country, 3 hours at night, 3 hours of instrument time, and other requirements specific to the category and class rating sought.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are like some specifics per plane or whatever. The thing is talking about instrument time. The one thing that I do know about pilot licensure is that you can be certified for different ways of flying. One's VFR and one's IFR. VFR means visual flight rules. So that in that case, you can't fly when weather conditions make it so you can't see or at night or other things like that. And then the other one is IFR, instrument flight rules, which means that you can basically fly blind by just looking at your instrument panel in your aircraft. So that's what
and
the
reading
different
it to know
what's
going on.
I think that in order to get IFR certified, I remember my dad talking about this. He like had to, during his exam, he had to put on these glasses that basically are blinders, so you can't see anything about what's going outside, what's going on outside. You can only see the instrument panel.
That's wild.
Yeah, that would be really scary. So before we move on to the commercial licensing, I finally dragged my dad onto the podcast. I knew this was going to happen eventually, but I spoke with him a bit and asked him some questions about flying, and this is what he had to say.
Hello, I'm Greg Adams from New Concord, Ohio.
Are you related to me in any way?
Chelsea, you might remember you're my daughter.
I do remember that.
Yeah. Hopefully you remember that.
I've been wanting to have you on the pod for a moment, and we might hear from you again someday. But this episode that we just are recording, we are talking about learning to fly, the process of learning to become a pilot.
Great.
And since you are one, I thought I would just ask you a few questions about your piloting experience. So, first of all, how did you decide you wanted to fly?
My dad knew somebody at Muskingum University who was also a pilot, and so we went out to the airport one day, and he took us up for about an hour, and after that, I kind of fell in love with the idea of being a pilot myself.
You've had your private license for how long now?
Probably over 40 years.
Okay. So it's been a long time since you first got your pilot's license, but what was that process like? And I know that you have ongoing training as a part of that.
Yeah, it's a kind of an ongoing process, but it's kind of a two-part process. There's a kind of a book process where you need to understand the principles of flight and the regulations around flight and a written portion of the exam. And then there's the kind of the practical portion of the exam where you go and fly with a flight test person who ensures that you can be safe in flight and you've mastered the principles of what it means to be a private pilot.
Cool. And you sort of just fly for fun and for travel now mostly, right?
Just for fun. We used to use it in business quite a bit, but now mostly just for fun. A good tool to get someplace pretty quickly. Not real far, but within maybe from Ohio to Baltimore or the East Coast. Out west is a little bit of a stretch.
Aren't too many places to refuel out there.
It's a long haul out there.
Okay. Well, what to you is the most challenging part of flying?
I think it's kind of changed over time. At one point, I was flying a lot more than I am right now. So right now, the challenge is just to kind of stay current, stay exercise, stay comfortable with the airplane, the airframe, and all the regulations. So now it's a matter of just staying comfortable. But back when I was learning, probably the biggest challenge is just all the different systems that in an airplane that you need to know pretty well how they behave. and ultimately how, when they don't behave, to manage your way through inevitable anomalies that pop up when you're in the air.
Do you have a story of an anomaly that happened in midair?
Well,
I know that you do. I would love to hear it.
Well, you might remember, Chelsea, when you were going to college at St. John's College, your mom and I hopped in the plane and we're going to make the trip over your way, and everything was going fine until we were over West Virginia, and the engine decided to quit on us. And as you know, we have a single engine airplane, so when you only have one,
there's just the one.
That means you're gonna end up landing whether you really want to or not. But
unscheduled, rapid unscheduled landing.
So fortunately, though, and this is kind of where all the training we were just talking about kind of kicks in, because during the training phase of learning to fly, you go through lots of simulated emergencies and lots of cases exactly like this in various phases of flight. So I'm grateful for the team of flight instructors that I had to make sure that I was comfortable with that. And fortunately, there was an airport nearby, and we glided in and put it down on the runway, and it all worked out, fortunately, pretty well.
The airport is in a little town in Maryland, and the name of the town is Accident,
Maryland. There's fortunately, God decided to put a little airport on the ridge in Accident, Maryland, and that's the airport that we landed in. Interestingly, 80% of the United States from 10,000 feet, which is the altitude that we were at, 80% of the United States, in our airplane, you can glide to a landing from 10,000 feet. So
that's pretty impressive. And you always tell this story and you sound so cool, calm, and collected. But when my mom tells this story, she talks about noticing that you started talking on the radio a little more than might be usual at that point in the flight, and that there was smoke coming in through the floor of the cockpit.
Yeah. The piston became disconnected with the crankshaft and blew up through the...
That's really bad. In case you don't know anything about engines, that's bad. That's not normal for that to happen. That was
not normal, so we had a little bit of oil, but it wasn't a major fire, and the main thing was just taking advantage of getting it down safely and keeping your wits about you to let the training kick in and get it on the ground. Unfortunately, we were able to do that.
All right. Well, I won't keep you much longer, but as a final note, do you have any words for aspiring pilots out there or people who are thinking about going into aviation?
I would highly encourage anybody to learn to fly if they have a passion to do it. It's a great exercise of all sorts of different skills, and mentally and also physically, to coordinate flights. So it's a great way to kind of keep your mind active, and ultimately also kind of keeps your capacity to always measure and weigh and manage risk, because a flight is kind of a constant stream of risk management. So I would highly encourage anyone to try at your local airport.
Thank you for stopping by the pod. I hope we'll hear more from you eventually.
It's an honor to be asked. So thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks.
Once you have your private pilot's license, then you can kind of decide if you want to be like Chelsea's dad and just kind of have it for yourself, or if you need further training, or if it's like a hope for a profession. If you're wanting to make it a profession, there are a few ways to go about becoming a pilot. One is to start with your private pilot's license and then move into a 4-year degree program. And there are a lot of really well-known schools throughout the United States that offer flight training like that. These are also the same steps that a lot of people would start if they want to become an astronaut, too. This is the first kind of step, and then deciding where to go from there. It's a years-long process, regardless of whatever route you've decided to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I got some information from the U.S. News, and it says that, here's a quote from this article, and as always, everything is in the show notes. So the quote says, "While many aspiring major airline pilots still take the traditional route, including getting your 4-year undergraduate degree in aviation or a related field, a growing number of airlines and aviation groups are also working to expand the pipeline of potential pilots. These efforts also aim to diversify a profession that is about 92% male and 96% white."
Wow.
And so we talked earlier about how there is a shortage of pilots, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics projected that there will be about 18,000 job openings for airline and commercial pilots each year through 2031.
Okay.
Thousands of jobs opening up in the next, 7 years for pilots. Airlines now are creating their own flight schools, and that's how they're getting people into their specific company.
I mean, that would make sense because it can be an expensive venture.
Right. And so the FAA is who sets the minimum certification requirements for air carriers, but each airline has its own minimum for what their experience requirements are.
Uh-huh.
The FAA requires 250 total hours for a commercial pilot certificate, but very few, if any, use that as their minimum standard. And most of them require 1,000 or 2,000 hours more. And then also another thing
I want to find the ones that require more.
Yeah.
Which ones are those?
Yeah. But the other thing is that market conditions also help to influence the minimum experience.
That's not good.
And so
That's not good.
let's hope that there's a lot of pilots
That's not good.
somewhere waiting for us. And so I looked up, just for example, United Airlines, what they have. And they have a program that's called Aviate. And their total cost is from private to commercial license is just under $90,000, and it takes well over 3 years to complete it.
Oh, geez.
But that includes all of your training, all of your hours, all of your everything. That's just one version of it. I also read that.
But they expect you to be a pilot for United by the time you're done with it. Yes.
Yes.
So it costs you $90,000, and you have to work for United.
Well, they said that your commercial pilot's license usually costs over $20,000 to get by themselves if you're doing it another way. So I guess this is kind of like looking at the investment. So you could start by getting your private pilot's license and saving money, and then starting the Aviate program once you already have that. So there are like different levels of which you could jump into their Aviate program. But if you wanted to do it with them from start to finish, it'd be about $90,000.
The people I know who want to do this commercially, they tend to find or gravitate toward an airline for some reason.
Yeah.
Like, so it's
For sure.
That's probably has something to do with it, what you're talking about, these training pipelines.
My student who was going through this process, when he was shopping for colleges based on not only obviously their success rate and, churning out pilots, but also who they had connections with. That was important to him. So I think people going into this probably already kind of have a strong fit.
Yeah.
But I think it makes sense for these companies to have their own flight schools. And one of the things on United's website was like, you could take a test to see which is the right fit for you. Because basically, as you're completing their program, you are able to work for them at some of their like smaller regional opportunities. So flying like really short trips in much smaller planes and things like that. So you could be making money as you did it. But obviously, the hope is that you become employed for United and you end up making what pilots can. And some pilots make well over $200,000 a year. So that $90,000 investment over the course of your lifetime, it's not that much different than a 4-year college degree and what some people leave, a master's program with or something like that as far as debt. So it's another, I don't know, it's kind of one of those things that's pros and cons, just like the cost of any sort of higher learning.
Yeah, and flight training programs look like, in addition to training on the machines and simulators and stuff like that, you're also learning a lot about weather, a lot about weather, about your systems and computers and mechanical parts and fuel and balancing. You have to do a lot of math. Yeah. There are a lot of things to go through in these programs. So
some people who become commercial pilots go by way of a 4-year degree or a training program through a specific company, right? But a lot of people become pilots by way of military. I went through and chose a few of the military requirements based on the branch. In the Air Force, you have to be at least 18 years old, but not older than 33. You have to be a U.S. citizen. You have to be able to submit a background investigation. You have to be between 5'4" and 6'5", and that depends on your aircraft. You can't be overweight. You can't have any allergies or asthma past the age of 12.
Oh, wow.
You must have an uncorrected vision equal to or better than 20/50.
I don't know if I could pass that one.
You must not be colorblind or have had laser eye surgery.
What?
You have to have a physical and a psychological evaluation. You have to have a bachelor's degree with a GPA of a minimum of 3.4, preferably in the sciences. You have to pass their basic aptitude test and their qualifying test. And you have to successfully complete flight school, officer training school, and the Air Force specialized undergraduate pilot training.
Wow.
To fly in the Air Force.
Okay.
Now, here's what you have to do in order to fly for the Army. The Army is the only branch of the military where you learn how to become a pilot with a high school degree or equivalent. So in exchange for paid pilot training, you'll commit to 10 years of service after you graduate from the 6 weeks warrant officer flight school as an aviation warrant officer. And then that's, according to their website, a respected aviation expert role for the Army. And then from there, you could work your way. And mostly what you would be flying for the Army are helicopters.
Cargo.
They had a list of all the helicopters you could be flying, and they said they looked cool.
Yeah.
So I decided to end with maybe the most famous group of flyers, I think, that most Americans could identify. And that's the Blue Angels. So this is the Navy's.
I lived in Annapolis for a long time, and they would fly over pretty much every year for the Naval Academy graduation.
Commissioning or whatever?
Mhm,
Oh, okay,
commissioning
yeah.
week.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the Blue Angels, you probably recognize them based on their really cool planes, and they're all blue and yellow. So this year, their team has a combination of Marines and sailors, and in total, they have 138 members. They were created in 1946 to boost morale and encourage interest in the military following World War II, and their name probably came from a strip club.
Oh.
Although other articles tried to call it not a strip club, but I'm going to bet it was a strip club.
Interesting. Did not know that.
So
Yikes.
in 2021, the Blue Angels made big news because they actually changed their planes.
Oh. Okay.
So they now fly a Boeing FA-18 Super Hornet.
Wow.
And their support is a big guy. He's a C-130J Super Hercules. And his name is Fat Albert.
I've seen this plane.
And
It
Fat
looks
Albert
funny.
is needed because they have so many of them in their team to move around.
Uh-huh.
He is the support plane for all of the Angels as they go. The team itself flies up to 7 planes, and the flight leader is the number 1, and they're the commanding officer, and they're always a Navy commander. This Navy commander can be promoted to captain mid-tour, if approved for captain. And then pilots 2 through 7 are either Navy lieutenant commanders or lieutenants, or Marine Corps majors or captains. So basically, from there, their numbers are important because that's which plane they fly in the formation.
Okay.
And if you don't know what the Blue Angels look like or what these formations are supposed to be, I would just look on YouTube. There's a ton of air shows of them. They're really neat.
They're fighter jets, and they fly very, very close together in formation.
And
That's
they
the
can
main
fly like
thing.
one on top of the other, like super close. And anyways, it's really, really neat what they do. Normally, people will serve as a Blue Angel for 2 or 3 years at most. And then they go back to some other form of active duty where they might return to be a pilot otherwise. And the first woman named to the Blue Angels as an FA-18 demonstration pilot was Lieutenant Amanda Lee, who is a member of the 2023 team. So they're based in Florida, but they train in California, and they spend their year mostly traveling and doing air shows. And Fat Albert, the big guy I mentioned, their support Boeing, is part of the show. Mm-hmm. He gets to make his own passes. Since 1946, a total of 20 Blue Angels pilots and 1 crew member have died while assigned to the flight team. 4 other
it's
pilots.
dangerous.
Yeah. And then 4 other pilots died in combat action after their service with the Blue Angels. And an important thing about the Blue Angels is that they do not fly in combat. They are a show team, basically. Being a Blue Angel is kind of like being a sentinel guard at the Tomb of the Unknown. Like, it's one of the most highly sought after things that, you know, these Marines
It's very prestigious.
Yeah, sailors can be. So they do not fly in combat. However, during the Korean War in 1950, they disbanded, and some of them chose to join a fighter squadron, which was famously named Satan's Kittens. And they fought and flew for Satan's Kittens in the Korean War.
Wow. Okay.
It's a really interesting history. They basically use them as a way to try to promote, you know, like this American like dream of like what being in the military can be. And it is really impressive to see them. I've watched a lot of their YouTube videos while researching this. But yeah, the Blue Angels travel around the country. They do hundreds of shows in a year, sometimes even. And it says that they travel up to 300 days a year. One of my dad's friends, her niece was one of their support.
Huh.
Yeah. So she had pictures of, she was assigned to one of the pilots and that plane and helped do that work. Pretty cool travel.
Cool.
She was pretty young when she got to do it too. So it was like, she wasn't married or anything. It was like a great, you know, she loved getting to work on the plane and get to know them, but it's really cool.
Yeah, the shows are really impressive. I've seen them.
That's on my list.
Several
I'd like to
times.
see them in real life. So some
Okay.
different flight options if you want to become a commercial pilot or if you just want to hang out in your gyroplane. There we have it. Fill in the blank?
Fill in the blank.
Okay.
This is a trivia slot. We do it every episode. Please, if you have the answer, write into us. hello@16to1.com, all spelled out. We would love to hear from you. If you get the question right, we will send you some stickers. Or even if you don't get the question right, we will send you some stickers. Go ahead and write in if you know the answer. And here's last episode's answer.
Anne Boleyn, King Henry VIII's famous second wife, who was beheaded because of lies, was killed on May 19th, 1536, at the Tower of London. It is said that on the anniversary of her death, she can be seen haunting the tower, carrying her own head.
Creepy.
In what year did William the Conqueror build the White Tower, the first of many buildings built as part of the construction of what would become the Tower of London? That was 1066.
It's an old building.
Right. This episode?
Yep. The first person on the ground to direct planes so that they would not collide. The first air traffic controller was hired by the city of St. Louis in 1929 to work at Lambert Field.
Huh.
He stood on the airfield and waved flags at planes to let pilots know when they could land, take off, and when they shouldn't.
Oh,
and I
cool.
pulled that from the FAA website, actually.
Nice.
So who was the first air traffic controller?
That's kind of interesting.
It is.
It's one of those things you don't need them till you need them.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny to think of air traffic controllers actually standing out
Like
on tarmacs,
you
waving
point
flags.
at a plane in the sky.
But, yeah, they don't really do that so much anymore. They'd sit in an air traffic control tower usually.
Yeah, because they always used to be on the list of like most stressful jobs or whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, who was the first one? That's the trivia question.
Cool.
Ready to talk about what we learned in
you
the
wanna
last
go
couple
first?
of weeks? Okay.
Go for it.
I learned something related to one of our headlines above when we talked about New York City schools changing its reading curriculum. I think this has something to do with why. I think we mentioned this on the pod when we heard about it. There's a podcast series called Sold a Story from American Public Media, and finally we got around to listening to it. But it came out last year, I believe. Sold a Story. You need to go listen to it. It is all about how we are teaching our kids to read incorrectly. The host of this podcast, her name's Emily Hanford. She investigates this series of influential people and decisions, and some of these people work at OSU, which I thought was interesting because that's so Ohio State. It's so close to us. Some of them work at Teachers College, Columbia University. So this kind of hits close to home, and nobody comes out of it looking particularly good. But this whole expose is basically, I don't want to give it all away, but we're disadvantaging a whole generation of students, and we already have done it, and we've been doing it for a long time, and we know it's wrong, and we know it doesn't work, and we're still doing it. And this podcast is all about why. It's also part of the reason that some of these big districts are starting to look at their reading curricula and say, hey, this isn't working. I don't want to give the whole thing away. It's highly worth a listen, and it's going to make you mad, and it's going to make you go want to pound on the doors of your school district. It's kind of startling. It kept blowing my mind over and over again when I was listening to it. I was just like, how is this happening? It's called Sold a Story from APM Reports, and it's wildly worth a listen podcast series. What did you learn?
I learned about the European football clubs and how they work. We started watching Welcome to Wrexham, which is a show about Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds buying the Wrexham Football Club.
Yeah.
And this isn't a spoiler, but they were able to, after their second season, move them up a ring in the system
A
of
new
European
league. They're
Football
into
Club.
a new league, yeah.
So the European Football League, though, or clubs, are in leagues that's unlike anything we have in America. The top, there's the Premier League, and then they have the Championship League, and then Leagues 1 and 2, and then the National League. And the National League is where Wrexham was when they purchased it.
Got it.
And so basically every year, depending on how your team does, you can either be promoted or relegated down further and further, or up higher and higher into, let's say, the Championship League or Premier League or something like that.
And it comes with, prestige and television airtime and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So.
Better players, better coaches, better facilities, all of it. And so it's been really interesting to learn about the runnings of a football club and what that looks like and just how different it is. And it's basically like the show makes the comparison that imagine if the Yankees lost 130 games in a season and then they got moved down to minor league and they were playing the Toledo Mud Hens. That's basically what would be happening if any of our systems work like this. It's been fun to learn about. And I think I'm going to pick a football club.
We need to pick a...
I think I'm just going to pick one. I think I'm just going to look at a list and I'm going to be like, this is nice. I want to do no research because I know like the big ones and I don't want to, become one of those.
Okay.
I think it would just be fun to have like a strong attachment to like some random football club.
European football club.
Yeah, because I just want like a group of sad people in a pub. That's what I want.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So anyways, that's what I've learned.
Sounds good. I think that about wraps it. Like we said, next episode's going to be your review volume 2, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for supporting 16 to 1.
We're trying to grow our audience, so please check us out at 16to1.com, all spelled out, and tell your friends about the show.
On our website, you can find links to follow us on social media, an archive of all our old episodes, and a contact form where you can get in touch.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show. This is maybe one of our most unhinged episodes.
I like it.
I don't know why I thought
I
this
like
was
it.
going to be normal.
I like it a lot.